Lesson 36. Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, Chapter 2. Sutra 16. One of my favorite sutras. The misery which is not yet come can and is to be avoided. This is Patanjali saying, use common sense. Which, as you probably know, is not so common. Common sense, in contradiction with what it implies, is not so common. The misery which has not happened yet can and should be avoided. Okay, examples. There are so many examples. You're busy with your mobile phone and you cross the street. You get hit by a car. Stupid. When you cross the road, that should be the only thing that you are doing. Look left, look right, several times. Even when the light is green, because there are cars that jump the red light. But if you try to multitask, you already know it never ends well. But in a situation like crossing the road, that can cost you your life or your health. Common sense tells us better pay attention. So if you don't pay attention, according to Patanjali, you're stupid. Same with driving. I see so many people with their phone in their hand, or worse, like this, while they are driving. That not only puts them in danger to crash their car, but it can also put innocent people in danger. Other drivers or pedestrians, cyclists. Research shows that since the introduction of the mobile phone, since people can communicate by phone in the car, the number of deaths in traffic, which for decades has been going down, is starting to go up again. Entirely to blame on the use of the mobile phone while driving. Now you have hands-free kids, so you can keep both hands on the steering wheel, and here you call it speakerphone. But even then, because you focus on the conversation, you're still distracted. Worse, of course, if you start texting while driving. You have various grades of danger, but it's all dangerous anyway. It's like driving drunk. When you ride on the highway, it's very easy to pick out the cars of people who are distracted, because they don't go with the flow. They usually go slower than the rest of the traffic, causing an obstacle. Worse if they swerve from the left to the right, as if they are drunk. When you look inside the window, you see that they are occupied with their phone. It's dangerous. Patanjali says, don't be a fool. And after it happened, it's too late. Sometimes you're not alive anymore, no room for regret. There's only one thing. You know, when you smoke, everybody knows now. When you smoke, it very likely in the long term will lead to lung cancer. Very likely. If you're lucky, you won't. But percentage-wise, it's quite likely that you will eventually, in the long term, it can take 30 years, 40 years, but you will end up with lung cancer and die from it. If you're addicted to smoking and you know that, you will, based on Patanjali's philosophy, at least try to quit. I did. It took years, because I did it in my way, the yogi way. First trying to control it, and then gradually reducing it, until one day there's no need anymore. Just in a very natural way. Anyway, leaving that aside, my whole family smoked. My dad always made jokes about it. My dad was the heaviest smoker of all. And when he was coughing, he would make jokes like, yeah, I went to the doctor and he told me to light another one as a cure. He died from lung cancer, obviously. And even with a family member dying from lung cancer, other family members just continue smoking, except me. The misery that has not yet come, can be avoided, can and must be avoided. When you're young, you feel full of energy, you feel indestructible, you feel immortal. Everybody who is young feels like that. But you know that you will one day get old. Because everybody does so. And you have grandparents, you have neighbors, and you see that people who get old develop diseases. More and more. The older we get, the more diseases we stack one upon the other. Just go to a hospital or go to a pharmacy and observe. You see people coming out with big plastic bags full of medicine. If you take good care of yourself, you can avoid that. You cannot avoid dying. We all will die someday. But it can make a big difference whether you get old suffering from all kinds of diseases, which I think is very depressing. I'm already depressed when I have a simple flu and feel miserable. Or I hate momsar, that your energy is drained and you feel like, it's just a flu. Just try to imagine if you have a heart disease, if you have a lung disease, if your kidneys don't function anymore, your liver is breaking down, what have you. It requires that you do maintenance. Not when you're old, now you have to start. I had an old lady. Remember the story I told you about this lady who, a member of the gym where I had my yoga classes, who contacts me once in a while, and she brought me to Changchungdong, to an office, through a secret door and what have you, with a 84-year-old grandpa who did a 180-degree split. She once told me, she came to my class every morning when I had my classes there. She once told me, I wish I had started practicing yoga 30 years earlier. She was busy with her professional life as a 교장 뭐야? 영어로 교장? Head teacher of a middle school, and creating wealth. She owns many apartments that she bought when they were very cheap and are now worth a lot of money because the housing market has skyrocketed in the past 40 years. She bought apartments for 70, 80 million won, and they are worth shibok, like that, in that range. Now she realizes that that is not everything in life. And while gradually getting older, gradually her health deteriorated, and only in a very late stage she actually started taking care of herself and realizing that it is difficult to reverse the decline. That's Patanjali saying here. Don't wait until it is too late. Common sense tells us where it is going. We have to do effort. It's about control, it's about discipline, but it starts with consciousness, which you develop. Actually, the sutra is obvious. It explains why many people who start practicing yoga very naturally go into the direction of New Age. What is New Age? It's trying to be vegetarian or vegan. It's consciousness of health. So you start eating healthier food, alternative therapies as opposed to therapies based on chemical medicine, and so on. Why? Because you become conscious. You start looking for ways in life that are either less harmful or more auspicious towards health and well-being. It's a natural consequence of your increasing consciousness and sensitivity that you choose ways of life that don't deteriorate your condition and your health, but build up your health and condition. Now, these examples that I've given you so far is common sense. It's not so difficult to understand. There's a lot more to it, and it goes much deeper. We're talking here about the Kleshas. And if you pay attention, you notice how it happens every time you end up in misery. Every time you end up suffering because of conflict occurring. When you start paying attention and you understand it, you develop insight, you become experienced. Before you become experienced, before you develop the consciousness, it just happens. And the moment that you find out, you're already in the middle of it, in the middle of the misery, the middle of the conflict. But since you started going through those processes consciously, you now start recognizing it before it happens. You develop the power of anticipation. You understand the word anticipation? Expecting something to happen that hasn't happened yet. But the signals are there. situation is in the stages of preparation. It hasn't happened yet, it hasn't manifested yet. But the sensitive person, the conscious person, can feel that something, in Dutch we say something is brewing, something is starting to develop. Based on your experience, you anticipate the misery that it is going to lead to. And then as a yogi, you step in and you stop the process. Easy? No, not at all. Because you are a human being, you have certain tendencies. Often, you find excuses to ignore the coming danger or misery. Like people who smoke. Have you ever talked with people who smoke? They always have excuses for not quitting. Now, smoking is a very obvious example, but we are all guilty of always finding excuses for avoiding misery. You will say, yes, but this, or yes, but that. You push away the negative and you justify it with a positive. It's human, we all do this. But if you have experienced this several times, there must come a day that you say, no more. That is what Patanjali is saying here. Common sense tells you, stay away. You know how this is going to end. So many things. You know, every day I go to the riverside because I walk the dogs. Several times I go to the riverside. I have to cross a busy road. There is a crosswalk and there is a triangle where people wait for the green light. But in between the sidewalk and the big road, there is this triangle where people wait, but there is a curve where people go in the other direction. So people who are standing on that triangle are in danger of being hit by a car on the big road and one that goes through the curve. And I have seen, the curve is very high, I've seen several times cars stuck there. They had to be dragged off by a tow car. It means regularly motorists bump into that triangle where people gather. If you are the least bit conscious, you anticipate the possibility that sooner or later another car is going to bump into that triangle. In Dutch we call it a traffic island. An escape island, we call it an escape island. So I always wait on the sidewalk. And only when the light is green I cross the first and then the triangle and then the big road. If I would wait there where other people wait, I would be very anxious, looking over my shoulder, and just because you're conscious, a consciousness that other people don't have. The misery that has not come can and must be avoided. It may not happen ever in your lifetime, but it could. Avoid it. You know, I've been driving cars since I was 30. Never ever had an accident. Ever. Knock on wood. Tomorrow I'm going to have an accident. never ever had an accident. That's only possible if you pay attention. Because statistically, people have an accident at least once a year. So some people once every 5 years, some people once every 15 years, some people 3 times a year. But have no accidents at all, that is quite rare. The taxi drivers in Korea who have no accidents for 10 years, they put this crown on the roof. Mobom taxi or something. But that's quite a thing, not to have any accident at all. But it's not that difficult actually. So when you drive, you must do only that. And not be busy with smoking, with your phone, with your navigation. When you drive, you must only drive. You know what? Driving becomes very enjoyable if you do it like that. I become one with the car. I enjoy the hum of the engine. It's like a meditation. And while your eyes are on the road, you know what is happening left, right, and in the back with the use of your mirrors. Intuitively, you have everything under control. That is how you avoid accidents. So this applies to everything in life. When you cook, you can cut yourself or you can burn yourself. But if you pay attention, the chance that that happens is very small. Just pay attention. Don't try to multitask. I was once cooking and because I'm in control, it looks like I'm multitasking, but I'm not. But I can put several processes in motion and keep it under control. So my friend at that time said, I will do the cooking today. And cooking and making coffee and this and that. And then everything went wrong and the coffee overflowed. And I said, take it easy. You know, don't try to do like I do because it's something that takes years to evolve like that. It was really funny. You know the Swedish chef? Shirley Birdie Poof? A little bit like that. You know the Muppet Show? No. You're too young or I'm too old. Swedish chef is playing tennis with meatballs. And, you know, everything explodes in his kitchen. But that's why I'm laughing thinking about that situation, because it was just like that. The misery that has not come can and must be avoided. It's serious business. If you pay attention, you can see it coming. And who would want to experience misery if you could have avoided it? Nobody. And yet we do it all the time. Why? Because we're only human. It's karma, it's our character. So little by little, try to bend the curve the other way. Take control. And avoid most of it. You will never be perfect, but every time you learn, especially now that you start paying attention, every time you learn. On page 2, I mentioned something about misguided neighborly love. That is actually an important subject. When your heart opens up, you want to help people when they are in misery, right? Yeah. So, when you help people who are in trouble, you must be very careful not to solve the trouble for them. Strange, huh? But actually it's logical. Why do we experience misery? To learn. Because you experience misery, you learn something about your Kleshas. You learn something about who you are, how you function, and how every time you end up in misery. I mentioned many times, not only today but throughout this course, that your failures, your misery, are your teachers. We don't grow, we don't develop without failing, without making mistakes. So when you understand that, when other people are in misery, and you solve their problem for them, you deny them an opportunity to learn and grow. What happens? You solve their problem, it will happen again next time because they didn't learn. Strange, huh? I'll give you an example, a little bit tragic. So, the first 10 years that I was in Korea, I was in a relationship. And my partner had a sister who was deaf-mute. Who was married with a guy who was also deaf-mute. They had 2 daughters who were perfectly normal. In Korea, when a person is handicapped, they're being treated as very pitiful. So that is how the family treated her, as being incapable of living her own life and taking care of herself and her family. You know what? She started behaving like that. No job, no responsibility, because big sister will take care of everything. But it was a family. They had a house, the down payment of which was paid by the other family members. So now, because it was my partner's sister, it became my problem too, because I saw what was happening. My sister had her own business, her brother had a factory, his own business, and they were always giving them jobs to make some money. Always they would quit within a week. So then they would talk to acquaintances. Hey, can you give them a job so they make some money? So they start working and then they just quit. And then you visit them at home, the little money that they got, they're having a chicken and pizza party. They had a car. They had the newest TV. Totally careless. But every 3 months, without fail, she would knock the door and say, "Sister, Oni," with a fan of bills, electricity, internet, TV, gas. Every 3 months it was cut off because they didn't pay the bills. And every 3 months, Oni would collect money from other 3 brothers and pay the bills so that everything would be connected again. Every 3 months, the same ritual. You know what I did? I told my partner to stop paying the bills. They were evicted from their house, ending up in a very, very small apartment that it looks like an apartment on the outside, but if you enter the door, the apartment is as big as your restroom. Super, super small. That's my karma, right? I caused it. You think. You know what really happened? Because we stopped helping them, It took a little time, but she started taking care of herself. She started her own business selling accessories in a stall outside. She moved to a nice apartment on the 23rd floor in Uijeongbu. Not an apartment as big as your restroom, but a real apartment with 3 rooms. She got self-respect, pride, and most importantly, those 2 children who were growing up for no good, 2 young girls who became the bullies in school, smoking behind the school building in the break and after school, and forming gangs around them, bullying other kids. They don't even remember their bad behavior anymore. They became model students, and eventually they graduated from good college. So I felt very bad in the first instance, but I knew what this was about. Because before, they had no pride, no self-respect, and just let everybody else take care of their misery. It's nice, it's comfortable, who cares? But this is what it means. That when you help, try to help in a way that people can help themselves. I did support them, we did support them, with bags of shoppings and money when they needed to. Not too much. But it led them to start taking care of themselves in a very surprising, amazing way. Starting her own business, moving to a nice apartment in Uijeongbu. It took a little time. I was a little bit, my God, what did I do? No, but that is exactly what this means. So you stay at a distance. If really necessary, you step in and help. But you never help in such a way that you solve people's problem, because they will not develop, they will not grow. Can you understand that helping people is not that simple, like everything else in yoga? It's not simple. You have to do it in a smart way. You have to do it in a calculated way. Help in such a way that you help the person help themselves. Do not solve their problem for them, because it simply will happen again. Sounds a little bit cold, huh? It's not, actually. You can see that, huh? Sutra 17. The cause of that which is to be avoided is the union of the seer and the seen. We have come across a sutra very similar to this before, where Purusha is being confused with Buddhi. It's about identification. The union of the seer and the seen is what you see is the material world, the world around you. What you see is the situation you find yourself in, a conflict. There's always energy, there's always feeling, emotion, thought going on. The normal person becomes one with that. So if there is a situation where there is aggression, you become aggressive, you become angry, you start to fight. That is the natural reaction, which Patanjali says can be avoided, should be avoided, because you know it's going to lead to misery. But the human being has a limitation. We are lacking the consciousness to oversee a situation from an objective point of view. Instead, we become one with the situation. If it's a joyful situation, we become joyful. If it's a sad situation, we become sad. If it's a conflictuous, aggressive situation, we become aggressive. We always just go with the flow, being a victim of the circumstances. Now, yoga promises you, there are various sutras written in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali that tell you that you become the master of the universe. And you think about Star Wars and Star Trek and what have you. No, that is this. Being the master of the universe is your consciousness, your ability based on your consciousness to detect the situation that you are in, and your ability to rise above that and observe it from a neutral point of view so that you stay in charge. And being the master of the universe means that you find yourself in a situation, you can take charge of that situation, you can change that situation. That means if you end up in a situation where there is aggression, normally you would be the victim of that situation and become aggressive yourself, with the resulting conflict and all the pain and misery. Master of the universe sees the situation and puts water on the fire. You have the ability to reduce the aggression and eventually take it out. Transform the energy from a negative into a positive one. That's only possible if you stop identifying with the situation that you find yourself in. Now that sounds very complicated. How do you do that? You don't do that. It's a change of your perception. Because you become more conscious, you will automatically find yourself in a position to take charge of situations and steer them into a direction that is harmonious, that is desirable. Away from misery. You can do that for yourself in a situation with other people involved. You can do that for all the people that are present. But the human tendency, with the lack of consciousness that we have in our poor condition, is that we just don't see it. You immerse yourself in the mood of the moment. Whether that is positive or negative is irrelevant. How do you do that? Simply keep practicing yoga. It has already led to a change in consciousness and sensitivity, and this is where it will lead. Sutra 18. Like Sutra 16, this is one I like very much. The scene, the objective side of manifestation, consists of the elements and sense organs, is the nature of cognition, activity and stability, sattva, rajas and tamas, and has for its purpose providing the Purusha with experience and liberation. Did I hear somebody sigh? Can you make anything of this? Not really, huh? But it's very simple. Don't they say God created the world for us, or something like that? Anybody familiar with the Bible? Purusha says, the world is there for you. Not to be a victim of, but to learn from. Life and everything related to life should be experienced also by a yogi. There are yoga practitioners who try to avoid everything in life. They try just to be holy, like a saint. But that's not what is meant to be. Patanjali tells us here, live life, but from now on do it consciously, and it will lead to liberation. The earth and everything in it, so Patanjali calls that the seen, objective side of manifestation. Then he makes it very complicated, saying it consists of the elements and sense organs, is the nature of cognition, activity and stability. But this is really about starting to interpret life and all its elements, all its experiences in a conscious way. And because you are only human, you will naturally draw conclusions. You will naturally avoid misery and conflict, and you will naturally more and more go in the direction of your dharma or your heart's content. In the process, you move away from your karma. Everything that determined your life without you being able to control. Very often leading to failure and misery. You move away from that more and more. It's a lifelong process. It's not something that you solve in a year or two. It's something that you will do from now on all the way to the end. It's like building a house. You start with laying the foundation. And you take a step back and you look at it and you see nothing yet. But the foundation is there. That is the start of your yoga practice. Then brick by brick, you start building walls, internal and external. After 2 years of building, you take a step back, you don't see that much. You start seeing structure, but you don't see much yet. But you keep building and building, which is your daily experiences. And since you do it consciously, you build experience, you build memory, you build ability, consciousness, ability to deal with things in the way you choose. After 5 years, you take a step back, and there's a wonderful house with a room, with a roof, with a restroom, shower. Yoga is like that. By repetition, you keep building, you keep adding bricks. In the beginning, it doesn't have much structure yet. Sometimes you ask yourself, what the hell am I doing? But you're working, building a palace for yourself. It just takes time. If you don't experience, or you don't experience consciously, you just continue living ignorant life like normal people do, you don't learn from life lived in this material world. So in contrast with what many spiritual people say, that you must avoid all materialism, Patanjali doesn't say that at all. He says the material world is a reality. It's foolish to pretend otherwise. But what you can do is start living in that material world from today consciously. Feel it. Feel how it affects you. And if it doesn't feel good, try to make adjustments. take control. Avoid negative occurrences, experiences, emotions, etc. The world is there for you. God created the world for you, for the human being. Not to indulge, but to learn, to grow, and to liberate yourself. Page 7, in bold characters, how do you create happiness when you feel miserable? It's not that difficult, really. When you feel miserable, and you honestly look at your misery and what caused it, you replace your negative thought, your misery, with positive thought. Because, again, your misery is your teacher. It's an alarm bell. Nothing more, nothing less. It's a matter of replacing the thought that the glass is half empty by the thought that the glass is half full. Positive thinking. When you understand how this works, you will see that every negative thing in life turns into a positive thing. Can you see that? Or do you think I'm talking nonsense? It sounds like a total paradox. Every negative thing in life turns into a positive. Without exception. How? Because you experience it consciously, you learn, and you correct. Easy? No. The answer again is no, it's not easy. But once you understand how that works, that is the only way for you to go forward. Sutra 19. The stages of the gunas are the particular, the universal, the differentiated, and undifferentiated. Now, this sutra is a little bit difficult to explain because it goes into things like the practice of samadhi and the different kinds of samadhi, and it becomes very it becomes kind of academic here, which is not my cup of tea. In the advanced course, when you understand samadhi and have practiced samadhi, it will become easier to explain this. And it will be explained because the whole book of Patanjali will be read and explained in the advanced course, including a repetition of the philosophy of the Kleshas. But what this sutra is telling us is that a human being fluctuates between conditions, tamas, rajas, and sattva. Not only that, life itself, the world around us, is changing in condition. So it becomes a little bit dizzying, a little bit complicated. But everything is energy. But what it is telling us, everything is dynamic. Human being is dynamic, the world is dynamic. Nothing is static. But the human being instinctively looks at the self and the world around us as a static entity. Well, the reality is the opposite. Everything is dynamic, everything is always moving, everything is always changing. And we know from a previous sutra that it is one of the sources of our suffering, our misery. how do you deal with that? The message is, that is pure yoga. Try to be in sattva as often and as much as possible. How? Practice yoga. Patanjali, as Fatmarama with the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, present us with a very thorough, systematic framework. If you take it serious, it's life-changing. And the philosophy of the Kleshas is, of course, about misery and how to avoid it. You will be able to avoid most misery in your life using the eightfold path, yoga. Questions? Okay, a lot to digest again. You can always let me know later if you have questions. Let's have a short break.